Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder how we understand what others are thinking or feeling, and what makes some people better at it than others? Today we're diving into a fascinating study that explores the connection between our everyday thinking skills and our ability to get inside someone else's head. At its heart, this research asks a big question. How much do our general thinking skills, the ones we use for all sorts of problems, actually help us understand other people? Think about it, we constantly need to figure out what someone else is seeing, what they believe, and why they might be acting a certain way. This ability, called mentalizing or sometimes theory of mind, is super important for getting along with others. Scientists have debated for a while whether mentalizing is its own special brain skill or if it is powered by the same thinking tools we use for everything else. This study wanted to get to the bottom of it. They focused on 3 core executive functions, which are like the brain's management system. These are interference resolution, which is basically ignoring distractions, set shifting, the ability to switch between different tasks or ideas flexibly, and memory updating, keeping track of new information and updating what we know. The researchers wondered if being good at these general thinking skills would automatically make people better at mentalizing, specifically at understanding someone else's visual perspective and their beliefs. To test this, they gathered a large group of people, 369 to be exact, and had them complete a series of online tasks. They used a clever task called the Seeing Believing task, which was designed to measure both visual perspective taking and belief reasoning all in one. Imagine you see a virtual character, Kim, looking at an object, then Kim leaves the room. The object might be swapped. And Kim comes back. You then have to guess what Kim will see or believe. This task allowed them to measure how well people could understand Kim's viewpoint and her beliefs, especially when they differed from your own. On top of that, participants played 3 classic brain games. The Stroop task tested their ability to ignore distracting information, like saying the color of the ink a word is printed in, even if the word itself is a different color. The Keep Track task measured their memory updating skills by having them remember items from different categories, presented one after another. And the Color Shape Switch tested their set shifting ability, seeing how quickly they could switch between looking for shapes or colors based on a cue. They then used a statistical technique called structural equation modeling, which is a fancy way of looking at how different variables relate to each other, to see if there were direct links between executive functions and mentalizing, or if visual perspective taking acted as a stepping stone for these executive functions to influence belief reasoning. Now, here is where things got interesting, and honestly a bit surprising. They hypothesized that better executive functions would lead to better mentalizing, but the results didn't quite line up with those predictions. For example, they found that better memory updating, the ability to update what you know, actually seemed to make understanding someone else's visual perspective a bit slower. This is the opposite of what they expected. It is like, the better you are at juggling new information, the more it might slow you down when you are trying to see things from someone else's point of view. The researchers suggest this might be because when you are really good at updating your memory, you might be more actively constructing and deconstructing those different perspectives, which takes time. It is not that memory updating is bad for seeing others' perspectives, but perhaps it adds a cognitive cost or extra processing time. Another big finding was about interference resolution, that skill of ignoring distractions. They found that better interference resolution was linked to slower false belief reasoning. This means that people who were better at ignoring distractions actually took longer to figure out what someone else might falsely believe. This is also counterintuitive. They propose that maybe when you are really good at suppressing things, you might over-suppress your own viewpoint when trying to understand someone else's false belief, which paradoxically makes the process slower. It's like your brain is trying too hard to ignore your own knowledge. What about set shifting, the ability to switch between tasks? Well, it turned out that set shifting didn't show any significant links to visual perspective taking or belief reasoning in this study. This was unexpected, as previous research hinted at the connection. The authors suggest that maybe the way they measured set shifting or the specific demands of the mentalizing tasks in this study meant that this particular skill wasn't as relevant as they thought. Perhaps the most significant finding was that visual perspective taking did not act as a bridge or a mediator between executive functions and belief reasoning. They had hypothesized that being good at understanding someone's visual perspective would help your general thinking skills translate into better belief reasoning. But the data didn't support this. Instead, it looks like these different aspects of mentalizing perspective taking and belief reasoning might be more separate than we thought. and the executive functions might influence them more directly and independently, or not at all in the ways predicted. Now, like all studies, this one has its limitations. The researchers themselves point out that the way they calculated some of their measures, particularly the difference scores for reaction times, might have created some statistical quirks that could affect the results. They also note that the reliability of some of their measures, especially for true belief reasoning, was quite low. This means that the results should be interpreted with caution. They also mentioned that because it was an online study, they couldn't control every aspect of the testing environment. So, what is the big takeaway from all this? This study suggests that the link between our everyday thinking skills and our ability to understand others isn't as straightforward as we might have assumed. It seems that executive functions don't universally boost all aspects of mentalizing. Instead, their influence might be more selective, subtle, and context-dependent. It challenges the idea that there is one simple mentalizing switch that is flipped by our general thinking abilities. This is really fascinating because it means our social minds are perhaps more nuanced and specialized than we give them credit for. While we all use executive functions daily, their specific roles in social cognition are complex and not always in the direction we'd intuitively guess. For instance, being really good at updating your knowledge might actually make it harder to quickly adopt another person's perspective. And being great at ignoring distractions might, in some cases, slow down your ability to understand false beliefs. The researchers are calling for future studies to use different methods, like brain imaging, to really pinpoint the timing and the brain areas involved. They also suggest exploring alternative ways to measure these skills, perhaps looking at broader patterns of performance rather than just speed and accuracy differences. It is a reminder that understanding the human mind is a journey, and each study, even when it doesn't confirm our initial ideas, adds a crucial piece to the puzzle. It encourages us to think critically about our own social interactions and how our brains manage to navigate them, and perhaps to be a little more patient with ourselves and others when we don't perfectly understand what is going on in their heads. If you found this dive into executive functions and mentalizing as mind-bending as I did, give this video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what you think this research means for everyday life. And don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the amazing world of psychology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.